all of us were very much looking forward to having the combination of a live audience with the virtual event. But unfortunately, despite everything else, the weather of all things, not cooperative. And even though in the window behind me, I'm looking out at a beautiful day over Hong Kong Harbor, we had a typhoon signal 8 at the start of the day. And so it made sense to move the event entirely online, which of course, today is no difficult challenge to have an event entirely online. In fact, I think the greater challenge sometimes is to actually have the live face-to-face event as opposed to the online only event. So sad to lose that, but very glad to have you all with us, and very glad to have a panel with me of good friends and experts on the topic that we're going to be speaking about today, which essentially is the future of technology and the role of talent development moving forward in Asia. And I'm joined by Tram Nguyen, co-founder of CFTE, which is the Center for Finance, Technology, and Entrepreneurship. Malik Kotadia. Malik is co-founder and global board chair of GIFT, the Global Impact FinTech Forum, and Yashoraj Tyagi. Yashoraj is CBO and CTO of CASHe. And what I wanted to start with is actually asking each of you, how did you get involved in your respective ventures? Because in each area, each of you are doing some very interesting things in this area. And I'd like to see, one, how you got there, and two, what it is that your firm or organization is actually focusing on yourselves in the context of talent development. So maybe I'll ask Tram first.
Yes, no, thanks a lot, Douglas. And first, thanks a lot for Mercer and the team for the great Forum Summit. It's a great pleasure and delighted to be part. Hello, everyone. So I'm the co-founder of CFT. We're the Center for Finance, Technology, and Entrepreneurship. So as Douglas was saying, and thanks, Douglas, for your introduction. To tell you a little bit about me, so CFT is the center that I co-founded a couple of years ago. I'm also the board member of EDEC, the board member of the Association of Corporate Treasurer and Entrepreneurship Expert at Said Business School. And prior to CFT, my role was not in education at all. I'm coming from the traditional world of finance. I used to be on the trading floor in New York for Standard Chartered, moved to London. It was supposed to be for 1 year. I've been here for 21 years in London, and I joined UBS Wealth Management in London and then advising family office too. But a couple of years ago, 6 years ago, we've realized that there was a huge knowledge gap, huge knowledge gap in the world of finance, technology, innovation, and in FinTech. And that's why we set it up CFT. So we are a high impact education platform, partnering today with governments, regulators, the largest financial institutions, and the startup to bridge the gap between finance, technology, innovation, and helping talent build skills through training programs online. At CFT, we are really privileged to have worked with amazing organizations and governments from all around the world to deliver what we call that upskilling, reskilling at scale. More than 100,000 professionals from 100 countries have participated in CFT program to accelerate their careers in FinTech and new finance. So, and in addition to London, CFT is also present in Singapore, Abu Dhabi, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Hungary, Luxembourg, and we just opened France. So I've been extremely vocal for many, many years already about the importance of upskilling, reskilling workforce. That's why we're working with them in this mission. And what I would say to contextualize of why we are doing this is that having created CFT a few years ago, what is really clear today is that we are witnessing a very quick transformation of the skills required in the financial services. And my question would be, what are those skills? why are we talking about upskilling, reskilling? So I spend time with government, policymakers, industry experts, entrepreneurs, C-suite execs, and academia to find frameworks and initiatives and ways we can do it in a way we can create talent very quickly, also in Europe, but also in Asia. And Douglas and Malik, we've been working together for years. We know each other. So there's lots of discussion we can share about what we are seeing in the industry, and especially in Asia. It's about talent in the financial education for Finance 2.0. And I'm also the co-author of a book, which is called the FinTech Job Report, a report that analyzes the 40,000 new jobs that didn't even exist a couple of years ago, that comes and offered by the 225 FinTech largest companies in the world. And what are the jobs that most people don't know? And the findings are really interesting. So I'll be very happy to share more later. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tram. I actually just wanted to follow up on that because, you know, I know in the context of CFTE, you began with a fairly sort of, if you will, traditional focus on online education. And I just wanted to see from the standpoint of what CFTE is doing now, what sort of directions are you going in the standpoint of what you're actually doing from this idea of upscaling?
Yes, no, thanks, Douglas, for the question. You're totally right. At the beginning of CFT, it was how do you create a platform for educating people in finance like myself, not want to be left behind, not understanding at all what is blockchain, APIs, cloud computing, AI, etc. And that was our kind of target audience. Today is no longer the case. Today, it's about how do you create online platform to allow governments to upskill at scale, not only thousands, but the idea is very much making a huge impact on the workforce. So we are now building academies, building programs for governments to upskill citizens, to create a new type of workforce, not only targeting finance professionals, but today we are upskilling pretty much everyone. Everyone coming from diverse industry, so people in technology, people that are entrepreneurs, marketers. We have very, very unique diversity in terms of people we are training so that they can join very quickly, efficiently, this new world of finance and the fintech startups. So we have very changed now our way of doing education online, really with the idea of how do you do it efficiently and at scale, delivering programs with the industry, by the industry, and for the industry, only taught by them. And I can say that it's not an easy job because educating adults is not educating like children. So we need to find a lot of different ways today to make sure that lifelong learning, continuous education are key for acknowledged by the government, but also incentivize adults to finish the program. So we have learned a lot over the past 5 years. And finally, perhaps something that I'm really, that is core to my work is to bring much more diversity to the face of finance, but women as well. And I have to be vocal about this because out of the 100,000 professionals upskilled at CFT or who have been learning through our online programs, 48% are women. So we are starting to see a change in terms of, let's say, gender, and in terms of the need, and the women are now really interested to take part of this new world of fintech, which is really encouraging.
Thanks for that, Tram. And I think we may come back to that point a little bit later. I wanted to turn to Malik. And in some ways, Malik, your background is not dissimilar to Tram's. And there's some overlaps between the organizations as well, but differences too. And plus you have your role in the university context. So maybe, Malik, tell us a little bit about what you're doing in this area and how you got there.
Sure. Thank you, Douglas. And firstly, hello to all our friends here who have logged in from all over the world, and to our viewers from mainland China and Hong Kong, ni hao. Thank you, Mushir, for giving me this opportunity to not only speak on a topic which is very close to my heart, but to share it with two other very dear friends, fellow travelers who are equally passionate and who are doing work in this space, and with Yashoraj as well. So Doug, you're absolutely right. When Traman was speaking, I was smiling because our backgrounds are fairly similar. I too come from 20 plus years of mainstream banking, although I was not a trader like her. So I was lucky that I was always in digital banking, digital finance, partly by design, partly by destiny from the very early days. So early 2000s, when there was no term called FinTech and nobody really cared about digital banking. You were really in one corner of the bank, and the bank didn't really believe in putting too much money in you, to now where it's right at the center of plate. I have seen that journey, not only seen that, I have been a part of this in various roles in various geographies. So I've been lucky to work with Citibank in different countries, both global, regional, and local roles, but the entire spectrum of digital finance. So digital transformation, digital product, digital engagement, digital marketing, all of that. And then as part of my role, Doug, I was already engaged with the startup ecosystem, FinTech ecosystem, which was flourishing by 2014-15, or not flourishing, but certainly coming up quite quickly in Singapore and parts of Southeast Asia. So that was part of my role as well, and that was where my interest always was because of my work and job at Citi. So I got quite deep into that space, and that's how I started getting into the, if you may say, the upskilling or the knowledge sharing space. I won't say upskilling because that's too big a word. Let it be reserved for governments, but knowledge sharing. So, starting with mentoring fintechs and startups who, as we understand, probably have very strong tech teams, but don't really understand business models and don't know how to work with banks. So I would help them, mentor them to be a bridge between banks and their organizations. And then, like you, Doug, I started speaking regularly at conferences. I started getting invites, and I started enjoying that because I felt it was an opportunity again to share my perspectives and whatever knowledge I was gathering along the way, meeting experts like you and Tram and others at scale. So I'm fortunate at this point, I have spoken at more than 200 plus conferences in 25 countries all over the world, probably addressed 100,000 professionals and experts across the entire spectrum of fintech. And that also allows you to see how this space has evolved. So when I started speaking in 2015-16, it was still about digital transformation, things like big data, etc. And then, the whole crypto hype cycles and winters, and I've seen how that has evolved. So always trying to keep people focused on the fundamentals rather than the hype and the speculative part of it. So that was the other way I got involved in the knowledge sharing aspect. And it was through one of these conferences that GIFT was born as a concept in 2018, in trying to bring together fellow experts, fellow travelers, fellow passionate advocates of this space to ensure global knowledge sharing. So in a way, again, very similar to what CFTE is doing, and you will be glad to know, I guess you are already in the know, but to our viewers, that we recently signed a collaboration MOU with CFTE for strategic partnership in really, because our missions are so similar about trying to deliver world-class fintech education and knowledge sharing, research, etc. at scale. So we felt that by joining forces, we would be able to go beyond the established centers of Singapore and Abu Dhabi and London and Paris and all of that to more emerging markets as well. And that's where GIFT is really focused on. You've been with us since the very beginning. Mushir has been with us. So you've seen how we've evolved. We are now in 70 countries in every continent of the world. And again, our primary mission really is to support, enable, and plug in emerging fintech, blockchain, startup, digital ecosystems all over the world. So, trying to not only enable intra-regional collaboration like we do with ASEAN or with perhaps East Asia, but inter-regional collaboration as well. So we've developed quite a growing and deep footprint in Africa, in LATAM. We're growing in Eastern and Southern Europe as well. So that is one platform through which we are trying to really share this kind of a knowledge Because again, for the 3 or 4 of us on this panel, it seems quite BAU, but I've been chatting with Traman. For many folks in markets in Nigeria or Uganda or Zambia or Bolivia or Argentina or Chile or Colombia or even Bangladesh and Nepal, etc. These are areas where they are really hungry for support, for knowledge, for really coming up, if not at par with the other leading centers. They don't want to be left behind, and it seems nobody really, even the MOUs, bilateral MOUs, which are signed are between a Singapore and a London, or a London and Australia. So how do you bring these kinds of emerging ecosystems up the curve? And that is really one of our key missions at GIFT, and we are really committed for knowledge sharing. And finally, like you, Doug, I also wear the hat of a professor of FinTech at the Asian Institute of Management and a couple of other universities. So, and this time, unlike Traman, this also has enabled me to teach MBA students. So, it's like a whole spectrum of reskilling, upskilling the workforce, my former colleagues from Citi, etc., who are in their 40s and 50s, but also these young talents who are going to enter the workforce and be the FinTech leaders of tomorrow. So that is also gratifying in its own way, and I believe a great imperative for this ecosystem, because where are going to be the FinTech leaders of tomorrow if you are only going to produce MBA finance and MBA marketing and MBA IT? So that also is something which I do as a matter of passion in this space. Thank you.
I think a lot of challenges to the standpoint of my world of sort of traditional higher education. I think 2 things that came out of there for me, Malik. One was this idea of trying to educate and support entrepreneurs, which I know Tram has found as a challenge as well, and something that I've been involved in, as well as Monsieur and many others. The second, and this actually overlaps with some of the work that I know that CFTE is doing, and that is this idea of working with governments and organizations to basically come up with strategies for human capital transformation. And I think that from the standpoint of GIFT is one of the more exciting directions, and probably a real opportunity from the standpoint of the 2. But let me turn at this stage to Yashoraj. And Yashoraj, if you could, tell us a bit about how you got to be where you are, and also your perspective, which is coming from a somewhat different place on the curve than Tram and Malik.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that question, and great to be on the panel. It was great to listen to Tram and Malik about their journeys, and absolutely fascinating to know about their stories and what they've been doing with the organization. I would love to be in connect to all of you and keep chatting because this is something very close to what we do as well. But just to obviously give a perspective of what we CASHe are trying to do. So essentially, what we realized that the problem that India has always faced as a market, which is similar to what a lot of emerging markets face as well, as Malik was alluding to, is the fact that is the seriously heavy under penetration of credit, right? And when you talk about emerging economies, fast developing markets grow on the back of debt and credit, right? You need credit for people to set up businesses. You need for people to set up MSMEs, for businesses to then grow. All of that is essentially a lot of times growth capital that is debt funded. But even if you want to empower the masses in any country to sort of take the next step and like advance in life, they would need credit for that. And credit has serious under penetration in India. Just give statistics on that. 10% of India actually has a credit score to start off with, right? And out of 10%, and only 10% of Indians who actually have a credit score have a score that is good enough for money to be for them to be lent money by a bank, right? So essentially, what we're talking about is like a formal, financial ecosystem is probably serving like 2% to 1% of the overall population, while that number has now been making significant strides because of a lot of initiatives around financial inclusion, A lot of banking happening at the grassroots level, a serious amount of initiatives taken up by the regulator and the government in terms of opening up bank accounts, getting people into the formal economy, but there's still a long way to go. So this is where we came in. We said that, hey, look, we want to solve that problem to a certain extent. We want to go ahead and make a dent in the financial inclusion story in India, and make people who were traditionally unbanked and underbanked get into the fold of formal credit, and basically use that as a credit-led financial inclusion story. But how do you solve that? Because you do not have a credit profile on those customers. You're trying to create a completely digital journey. You're not going to take any kind of mortgage securities. You sort of have to evaluate these customers in a completely digital journey. Probably not, and you can't use financial data on them because there exists no financial data on them, right? Because they've never had financial histories. So what do you do then in that case? So we said that, okay, we are going to borrow a leaf out of behavioral finance, which is something I personally am very close to. This is something we said that we will actively focus on. We'll see that can we look at a certain amount of alternative data on customers, which comes from a range of different channels. There's general spending behavior, buying behavior, the lifestyle patterns, who they are on a daily basis, and say that, okay, if they have access to behavioral data of customers at scale, I hope I'm audible. How can this data be used to find customers, right? And that we'll use finance-powered AI models at scale that will allow us not just, I happen to be a personal fan of Daniel Kahneman, but happen to be working at this lab in Berkeley back then, where we did a bunch of stuff on behavioral finance, and that's what I got hooked to. And that's been what has been a cornerstone of whatever we have developed over the last 6 to 7 years. That we said that, hey, look, we're going to sort of use this alternative financial data, and we are now going to score a whole bunch of Indian salaried millennials in tier 2, tier 3 cities, and credit score them, essentially lend them on our own balance sheet. Like, we are putting our money where our mouth is. And that's been the kind of the success story that we have had. But more so, I think that what has come out as a result, and something that is very, very pertinent to the discussion of this group, is the fact that we've seen that, okay, there is a tremendous amount of success we have been able to get, obviously, over time. It was not an overnight thing. It was not even a 1 year thing. It took us 3 to 4 years to perfect that. But now we have a fairly well-developed transfer learning, alternative credit scoring system in place, which we want to put out there as a SaaS in geographies that are similar to India in terms of in terms of being similar kind of emerging markets, similar kind of emerging economies, fast growth markets. We have done a bunch of deployments in Bangladesh. We have had a bunch of conversations in Latin America, where we are actively looking to sort of deploy, and partner with organizations that are also equally bullish on financial inclusion and alternative credit. And I believe that would be the next stage of financial inclusion that we get to see, because these markets have very similar patterns in terms of not just how people behave to credit, but mostly in terms of how this economies themselves are shaping up, in terms of how the stance the regulator is taking in terms of alternative credit, and in terms of how you see even basic things like mobile smartphone penetration and internet penetration shaping up, right? So it's the right step for these kind of economies to actually access these technologies and be at the cusp of their own financial revolutions. So that's what I'd probably add from my side.
Thanks for that. And I think it's something that I know for Tram and Malik, as well as myself, these are areas that we spend a lot of our time thinking about and working on. I think there are a couple of really interesting things in there. The first is this idea of the role of data in providing financial services. And it's something that, if you think about individual or SME lending in particular, this has been a long-term challenge over time. We've tried a lot of different things, but the one thing that has really worked is the sort of big data, aggregation of data approaches pioneered really by Ant and Amazon to lend money to hundreds of millions of people on the basis of large volumes of data that they've collected through other business models. In some ways, though, the challenge is how do you go about building a system that doesn't involve an Amazon or an Ant owning all of the data that is necessary in order to make that work. And China, in recent years, India with the new data aggregator strategy, I think we're seeing numbers of countries that are approaching this differently. And I think the other thing that is really interesting that's embedded in there that we may pick up a little bit later is in the context of actually providing financial services. How can you actually enhance the digital and financial literacy of your customers, which enables you to do better business, but also enables them to take better advantages of those services? And it's something that we're certainly seeing across Africa, but also in South Asia, and an increasing range of businesses that are basically helping individuals and SMEs to digitize in order to get access to the information that they then need to actually do financial services business with those people. And I think that this is one of those really interesting ideas. How do we actually partner digital and financial literacy with offering financial services? And I wanted to kind of skip a little bit in terms of where we were planning on going and skip to this idea that you've all highlighted, which is this area of inclusion in the last mile. And how can we do this? Tram, you mentioned women and the fact that you have almost an equal gender balance in your courses, which is amazing and not easy to do. Malik, you talked about entrepreneurs. And if we think about how do we get digital and financial literacy to entrepreneurs? And Yashoraj, you talked about individuals, but also I think implicitly SMEs. How do we improve the digital and financial literacy of SMEs? So maybe if we actually go back in the same order, Tram, Malik, and Yashoraj, this last mile question that we've all already highlighted. So Tram, over to you.
Yes, no, thanks a lot, Douglas. Yes, it's about how to go about building a big strategy about bringing new talents in FinTech. So that's the main problem we're facing today. My view is that we're going to be in the next, it's coming now, it's going to be a big recession mode. What does it mean? It means that it's going to be really, really tough for most of the people, not only in Asia, but everywhere around the world. Is going to be very global. And what I care about is not about the technology, it's about the people. How do you make sure to upskill and reskill and putting a strategy in place, which is today much more clearer? We have lots of tons of case studies that we have worked closely with governments and organizations to make sure that today the FinTech industry is a growing industry. We have seen $300 billion invested in the past 10 years. Last year, only $100 billion in FinTech. What does it mean? FinTech will keep growing. Whatever recession mode we are, FinTech companies are looking for talent. The problem we're facing is that there's a mismatch about employers looking for talent and how do you create those talents. So it's about putting some plans in place, a strategy about making sure that we can create talent for higher paid salary, because FinTech and blockchain industry they are looking for talents and they are paying very well. The problem we're facing that there's a mismatch about the demand and who are the talent and who could be the one who can benefit the most from those jobs, high paying. And I think that couldn't be a pressing need today as we speak. We need to prepare now. So we have put a lot of focus on making sure that we know how to do that. A competencies mapping strategy about what are the jobs in demand in the fintech industry and in finance in general, what are the skills and the competencies needed. 40,000 new jobs in fintech is not something we can, not knowing. So we are spending a lot of time with regulators and government to make sure that the mapping is doing a taxonomy of the job are doing. What are the framework to make sure that everyone today are benefiting from this research. But what we are doing today is that we're putting some initiative in place. And you're saying about diversity, which is something that I care a lot, making sure that today people from totally different background, different industry can join the fintech industry, because the fintech industry in needs of data scientists, fintech product manager, entrepreneurs. How do you make sure that those people are being able to do this type of jobs? So it's critical today that governments, regulators, organizations, and ecosystem play a critical role in upskilling, reskilling those people. And we have had some initiative that we have put in place. And you're talking about the women. Yes, I'm just telling you, first, I'm, as an educational platform, always looking for industry experts. So we have 400 industry experts around the world teaching. Those are fintech founders or the doers in fintech. But it's really difficult for me, and I'm trying to push boundaries. So today, we're putting a lot of effort is women to teach. So if you are a woman and you want to show your expertise, we're always looking for women. We are putting some focus in putting program led by governments, regulators. I don't know if I can mention something, but I will mention the program that we have just launched in, for example, Abu Dhabi, a scholarship to provide women and people that are unemployed, people that are in need of upskilling, coming from totally different background, to be upskilled and reskilled in fintech. And after a 9 months program, they will be able to find jobs. Those are the programs that we have been doing in different countries, in different shape and in different ways for professionals, as also they are looking for job. They can apply very immediately. They're learning to finding a job. So we work closely also with the startups, so that startups around the world, be in Africa, in Asia, everywhere, can provide case studies. And that helps a lot, so that people have their line in the CV saying that I have actually learned about fintech, but worked on a case study of a fintech. So I can apply if I were to be looking for a job in a specific role in certain countries. So this is the type of things, an initiative to help creating talents in fintech in Asia, but also in developing countries.
Thanks for that, Tram. A lot there. Malik, from the standpoint of entrepreneurs, what can we do?
Sure. Thanks, Doug. And I'll take a couple of steps back, if you're okay, just to zoom out a bit and I'll come to entrepreneurs, but I'll maybe share a couple of notes based on the bigger picture, in line with some of it, in line with what Tram also mentioned. So I think coming from 2 decades plus of banking, I do want to share a little bit of those perspectives as well. As Tram said, and I think as we've been discussing a lot in GIFT as well, the economic situation, in different parts of the world, especially in Europe and US, is such that we are staring at a recession. And even if you keep aside some of these cyclical aspects and record high inflations, etc., the fact is, at a structural level, banks are in a long-term consolidation and efficiency mode. So, there isn't going to be too much of new opportunities in the traditional finance sector. Even if there's going to be growth, it's going to be largely jobless growth, because banks are really in that protect your turf mode. So what will happen to all the new talent? I think that's a key question for all of us. The other is, as Tram also mentioned, and when I talk to so many of my former colleagues in banking, whether you spend 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in an organization or in functions becoming a specialist, the fact is they are getting anxious. Almost 90% of whom I talk to, or my colleagues, they are anxious that they're going to get redundated in 3, 4, 5 years. And that's the first question they ask me, especially when they hear that I'm also teaching fintech, on where do I even start with fintech. So I think We've all been talking about upskilling and last mile, but upskilling is no longer just a good to do, it's a need to do. And it's not just a need to do at an individual or even organizational level, as Traman repeatedly mentioned, it's a need to do at a societal level as well. Governments are really taking it up and they have to take it very seriously. The third thing really is that there continues to be a significant demand-supply mismatch. And this again is something that governments and regulators are coming in. I was fortunate a couple of years back to co-author a paper for the Indonesian regulator, OJK, along with the World Bank, where we actually focused and deep dived into how there could be a national talent development policy and a framework on how can we really produce, on the one hand, a country like Indonesia is producing so many unicorns, and on the other hand, there really isn't talent, right? Bankers are not used to being digital talent, and you don't have too many universities who are actively doing that. So how do you produce tens of thousands of this new talent? That is going to be a bigger and bigger question. And finally, from my perspective as an educator, I am seeing even MBAs now from the top business schools in different countries and regions. They are much more open to either opportunities in smaller, more nimble startups, or getting into startups themselves. And a few of my student groups have actually, decided not to take the traditional path, but the road less traveled, and set up their own startups. And me and a couple of other faculty are also mentors. So with that segue about entrepreneurship, I think there is no one size fits all. Doug, you probably understand this better than I do. But in my view, there will be three forces at play. It's the top down, the bottom up, and technology. And I think these three forces, there will be an interplay. And I like to call them the 4 Ps, in which I combine the top down, bottom up, and tech. So the first is, of course, platforms and offerings. And many fintechs or tech founders and entrepreneurs, as I mentioned in my opening as well, they come from a very strong tech background, but they don't really understand how to make money. They don't understand business models. They don't understand customer experience. They don't understand how to reach out to customers. So, what platforms to develop, what offerings to develop. For example, something as simple as Roska, which is basically, revolving savings, etc. In many parts of the emerging world, that's a model which people in local communities are much more used to, or much more comfortable with. So rather than trying to make it very daunting, can you go with models that people really understand? So that's the first part. The second, of course, is policies. We've spoken about it, and I won't go into details because of time, but things like enabling inclusion through eKYC, etc., and making it easier for entrepreneurs to service them rather than doing face-to-face KYC as we've always done as traditional bankers. The third is, of course, people. And this is what I keep telling my students and anybody who cares to listen as well. Be very clear about why you are getting into entrepreneurship and why you want to solve for financial inclusion. Yes, it's a noble thing. Yes, it sounds exciting, but be very clear about the why, because that is what will hold you in good stead in those dark nights when you will be wondering, when you see your colleagues making fat salaries, and here you are burning the midnight oil for no money. And I think finally, the fourth P is PPP, public-private partnerships, or any kind of partnerships, whether it is with local governments, last mile, like in the Philippines, we call them the barangays, which are really the smallest level of governance. That is where the trust factor is. That is where the real last mile outreach is. And I see quite a few entrepreneurs and fintechs smartly partnering with local governments. So I think, not that everybody has to follow these 4 Ps, but if you use this as a broad framework, then as an entrepreneur, you can at least have a reasonable shot at success.
Thanks for that, Malik. And I think a very good framework there. And I just want to pass over to Yashoraj to wrap us up from his standpoint on today's panel. Yashoraj.
So very interesting to hear about Tram in terms of. I hope I'm audible. Hello. Yeah. So very interesting to know, and I'll financial go ahead as you mentioned. Financial literacy is a must, and financial literacy really how deliver financial literacy, as you said, like really matters in terms of who is the one you're delivering that knowledge and experience to. So we spoke about individuals, we spoke about SMEs in India, but really, like, what does finance mean for everybody? Like, and financial literacy has to be delivered through the experience of how they deal with finance. For an SME today in India, they might be dealing with sort of just having to, make sure that the vendors are paid on time, they get regular payments from customers, the business keeps on growing, and potentially they have access to some amount of debt credit from a certain bank. Now, what the fintechs are trying to do is to kind of wrap up this entire experience and give it in one go to a particular SME, saying that, hey, look, I'll provide you this end-to-end experience in which you can manage your vendor relations, you can manage your customer relations, you can track your monthly sales volumes, you can also I'll also probably provide you with the relevant experience in terms of being able to access credit as well. Now, when all of this happens, it is, I think, the responsibility of that relevant financial organization in this context, being the fintech, being able to sort of make the SME understand, okay, hey, I'm giving this wow experience, but this is what it means. Like, this is what credit means for you, and it's very important because the SME in this context might not have ever dealt with formal credit before. They need to be aware of how, what happens if repayments don't come in for the debt we have given to you, where do you get reported, how does your credit score get impacted? All of that needs to come in, because, and that's important, because what people don't realize is that by taking a very short-term view, saying that, okay, I'm going to onboard X number of customers, give them this product, and my job is done, that's not it. They actually make those customers financially literate. They might just keep coming back, because then they'll see the value add between what this particular fintech is offering to them vis-a-vis what they had earlier. It's not just about customer experience. It's about a lot more. It's about knowing that this is probably what I was missing earlier. I'm getting access to a formal way of doing finance, which I did not have before. And this is basically what I'm getting much over and above the good experience that I have to do things digitally. So I think, and same goes for individuals as well. Today, if you look at individuals who are not accessing formal credit, formal banking, once you give them access to that, it's also very important for anybody to educate them about how this works. What are the implications of that? How does regulation work over here? What happens when you do XYZ things? What happens when you don't do XYZ things? It's fundamentally important to do that. Just to give an anecdotal example, millions of Indians today are locked out of the credit ecosystem because somebody at some point in time, they gave them a credit card and they did not know what a credit card is. They spent with that and they did not pay the bills on time because they did not know they had to do it. Something as basic as that. And now the credit scores got impacted and they never can access formal credit again because nobody will just give them credit knowing that their bad credit score. So this is what happens when you don't educate customers about what is it that they're getting into. Right, and this holds true for everybody, right? From rural credit to doing sort of credit to millennials in tier 1, tier 2 cities, everybody, right? And last part is of the regulator, and I think in India, particularly, the regulator has done a fabulous job in terms of getting people on board onto the formal financial ecosystem by creating those bank accounts at scale, giving them services digitally, and I think that their ecosystem partners need to come up in which they need to kind of join in forces and make sure that they are sort of bringing in the relevant amount of financial literacy so that people not only have access to these services, but they use it more frequently and also understand the implications and the riders that come with using that. So that's what I would add over there.
I think that's a wonderful point and a great one to wrap up our panel on as well. And a huge thanks to all three of you for a great discussion and to the VFF team for organizing a great event. I'm just going to leave on one last point, and that was I was sharing a similar panel of regulators and central bankers over the summer, and the topic, the focus of everyone was this idea of digital and financial literacy and how can we make it happen, because it's core to financial inclusion, it's core to development, it's core to avoiding crises and people getting financial problems. But as I think we've also all pointed out, it's actually also good business. Thanks, everyone. Look forward to talking again.